Yeah.
We're live. We're live. Audio's there from my side.
$29 viewers.
Nice.
Yeah.
Check
Hello.
Say something. It's on.
Testing 1 2 1 2 1 2. Can you hear me? Yeah. Perfect. Is it good? Is it good? Wonderful.
Ready. Just gonna turn on. Just leave it on. Leave it on. Leave it on. It's better. Better.
You take this.
To everyone watching, we're gonna be live in about 5 minutes. Fair distance.
Okay. Cool. What? It's on. So the way we're going to do it is. Can I mute? Can I?
No, he says you don't need to.
How are you doing today? We will be ready in just a couple of minutes. Thank you for your patience. Wireless connection. Yeah. Instagram? Yeah, it's already on. YouTube. YouTube. Excuse me. Could I have your attention, please? So, because we're live streaming, I won't be yelling into this microphone for the sake of the people watching from afar. We will be doing 30 minutes approximately. Think of like whatever you want to know about him and what he's done and what's next. And we're going to take questions from the audience. And if anybody out there watching this live stream have any questions for Allan, please write them in the live chat, and we'll also try to cover as many of those questions as possible. And I can follow here. And hopefully the live chat works here as well. Technology. So again, thank you all for coming and for having an interest in Allan and his race and what he's done. There's a lot of weird things that you can ask Allan. I have already asked him most questions myself previously, but you mentioned something very briefly in the video that we just watched, that you put a sticker on top of the very last mountain pass. What was that sticker, and could you maybe elaborate a bit on that and why you put that there?
First of all, it's relevant to say that Fergie has told me to keep my answers as brief as possible because I'm a bit of a chatterbox. So this is a pretty open-ended question to start with, so I'll try and be quick. It was a Gaze OK sticker. Gaze OK is like a LGBT cycling apparel brand that I started like 7 years ago. So I make cycling caps for queer and LGBT cyclists and supporters. So I had my Gaze OK sticker, which I put all over Kyrgyzstan during the race. I like to keep it in like very random but very obvious points for other racers to spot along the way, so they like knew that I came by already. It's relevant to say that while during the race, Kyrgyzstan announced a bunch of anti-LGBT legislation, which includes the promotion of non-traditional relationships. So technically, during the race, my simple act of solidarity became an illegal act, which I still stand in defiance of, and was very happy to be able to put my stickers up and promote that kind of message. But equally, it's a bit sad that I got to be able to come back to my sort of privileges and rights, or the rights to my privilege to my rights or something, whereas other people there still have to go through the struggle. But that was why I put my sticker up there. Was that nice and brief?
Couldn't have been
Cool.
better.
Nice, efficient.
Perfect. And whenever you have questions out there, feel free to put a hand up, and I'll pass you the microphone. Otherwise, I'll just keep on going.
So, Alan, we heard a lot about different sections of the race. Um, a lot about the hard sections of the race. How was it in general? Were there like a day where you didn't ride a bunch of elevation meters, where it was just like kind of flat, or a day where the roads were all right and it weren't like that bad? Something relatable for like a gravel ride anywhere, and when it's not like super rocky or slippery or temperatures rising and going down and yada yada.
No, not really. I think so. Like Silk Road as a route has a way of like even the easiest parts of it throw up other challenges, and then you're just not really sure how it's going to be until you get there. Like getting to the top of one of the really early enormous passes that was like of many hours of walking up a thing. We had a really long plateau, which was pretty smooth gravel, but then we had like 12 meters a second headwinds for the whole section, which was just really, really, and then dust clouds and all of this. One of the easier sections was probably there's a high plateau near the China border section of the race after checkpoint 2, which is like 180 kilometers of pretty barren, pretty flat. But then the sort of curveball is that it's like actually a 1 or 2% rise with absolutely no features, nothing to look at, and no resupply for 180 kilometers. And it's over 3,500 meters. So if you get there at night, it goes down to like -10. So there are easy elements and hard elements in every section of the race. That's a simple answer.
And then we have the first question from the live chat, directly from Austria, Velo Peaches. They're greeting, and they are asking, how many cigarettes did you smoke during the race?
It's an excellent question. I don't know, like a pack. Yeah, a pack in 12 days. It wasn't that bad. I'm not a bloody chain smoker. I may have picked up a few loose cigarettes at some shops because I think that's pretty fine to just grab 1 or 2 on your way, stick one behind your ear, and keep on rolling. Yeah, I would like to say that I'm not necessarily a heavy smoker, but for some reason, when I'm riding my bike, sometimes I smoke a bit more because it's kind of like snacking. You use any excuse to stop and have a snack, you know? So, yeah.
What was the first bike endurance race that you ever did, and what's the most important development that you've gone through up until this point?
Oof. My first race was Silk Road the first time, 2021, and obviously like that's very ambitious as your first ever bike race to do this race. But it's totally like I was saying at the end, like it's not out with your realm of possibility. Like if you like, you might not win the race because the people at the very top end of the race are like pushing a very superhuman level of endurance. But if your goal is just to finish, given that in Nelson Trees races, it's very common that only 50% of the start line gets to the finish line. Just making it to the end is a huge achievement. So if you just try and keep within the boundaries of the time limits of the race, it's pretty achievable for most people with a relative amount of experience and a good amount of fitness. Like one of the things I talked about before in like a previous interview I'd done about ultra was that you've kind of got this triangle trifecta of like the physical, the mechanical, and the mental. And as long as you got 2 out of 3 going really well for you, the third one's not that important. Like if you've got a great mentality and really strong legs, your bike can be kind of shit. And not that I'm saying my bike was shit. And you can make it to the end. If you've got a terrible mentality, but you're very strong and you've got an absolutely killer bike, like you'll do it. But so it's about how you manage the balance between the 3, and that changes in every race. You know, in some races you turn up and your bike isn't in great shape, or you haven't had time to train, but you're feeling really strong in the mind. Other times you're maybe not feeling really good in the mind in your daily life, but your bike is in great shape and you're in great shape. So you just have to work on a balance between the 3. And that's kind of what I've made work for me over time.
About the mechanical part.
Oh, God.
Yeah. I've heard you previously mentioned that that's your biggest fear out of those 3. When you go through a section like the 180 kilometers that you just mentioned before, are you ever afraid that a tire is going to explode or something like that that is not manageable out there? And what would you do in that case?
Oh, I'd be so bummed because I'm not good at that stuff. the mechanical stuff is always my biggest worry. Because I know I'm not that good at it, and that you're really, really testing the absolute limits of your bike on this, or at least I am. I'm like really caning it down trails and not looking after stuff. So if stuff goes wrong, I really wouldn't know what to do. And it does happen to people. Like some of the stories from Silk Road that nobody got to hear this year. Like there was a woman who broke her saddle rails, and she rode 100 kilometers with no saddle, and she strapped her seat bag to her backpack and just rode out the saddle for 100 kilometers. There was a guy who broke the little metal wiring for his Di2 shifter, his electronic shifting. So he was stuck in one gear. He did 150 kilometers in one gear, made it to some random town, found a piece of copper wire, and found some random man to weld it to his Di2 so that he could fix it. So like this happens to people, and I'm so incredibly grateful that nothing too major has happened to me. It's also relevant to say that I have like very low standards on my mechanical setup. So I can ride a bike that's really quite broken. It doesn't really bother me that much. So there's the perfectionists out there that want their bikes to be perfect can be very easily bothered by smaller mechanical issues. But for me, it has to be quite a big issue before I really care that much. And that works.
Following up on that, most people in here can see and feel and touch the bike, but for the rest of the people out there watching this live stream, what was the setup?
That's your question. You guys built a bike. It was silver and it had really nice tires on it. Come on, this is your bit. It was light.
Yeah, there was a question about how you charge your bike in the mountains, and that's maybe worth mentioning. Allan was riding a setup with a rear derailleur and a rear wheel on a hub from a brand called Classified, who has made this innovative hub that has 2 gears to it. So it's basically a replacement of the front derailleur. And it is true that that comes with a Bluetooth through axle for the rear wheel and a shifter that have to be charged. Was that ever an issue?
Yeah, this was an experience for us. I think all of us were a little bit worried about the potential for it not to go well, because it was just a technology that we hadn't tried, and you're out there in the middle of nowhere, and more things to charge is kind of stressful and all of this. In the end, it was fine. They told us that it was good on one charge for 18,000 shifts, but I'm very analog, and for people who don't have electronic stuff, like, do you know how many times you shift in a day? Like, I have no idea. So we were kind of going on a wing and a prayer, hoping that I wouldn't have to charge it. And in the end, 18,000 shifts is enough to finish Silk Road Mountain Race in 12 days. And for us, I also thought, or for Classified, I think it was a great advertisement, because very few people are going to do that level of endurance with their component before they pull it out and charge it again. So it was kind of like the maximum you could do it on. It is true that it actually didn't quite make it. It ran out of battery in the last 20K, but I was already over the climb. And I was telling somebody this yesterday, I was on the asphalt in the last 17 kilometers, and I was stuck in the little ring. So I was just spinning out on asphalt, and I got passed by like 3 locals on like extremely old, beaten up bikes. And they were like, "You're going really slow." And I was like, bye. But no, the Classified wheel worked out really well. I was very happy with it. And we brought an extra through axle and a shifter ring. We updated the firmware on the wheel before we left. It's like so weird, but it worked out.
In the beginning of the film, you told us that the race that you did was solely to compete with yourself instead of all the other riders. Why did you choose to go to an actual race almost on the other side of the world to do that, instead of making a crazy route from here to somewhere crazy?
Go crazy. I think you should go do a race, and then you'll see. Being able to put it within, like, I'm not necessarily a competitive person, and I think being a bike messenger, I'm much more competitive against the element of time than I am against other people. Like, it's cycling. There's always going to be some young gun that's faster than you, and that'll happen. But being able to compete against time and where you are in your fitness and push yourself really hard is really nice. But in addition to that, somebody else makes the route, it's normally a really amazing route in a really amazing part of the world. And then you get 200 other like really interesting, also crazy people that you get to share the experience with. And sharing that experience might mean that you eat some bread on the side of a trail for 5 minutes every 3 days with some stranger. But even that, when you're really pushing yourself, is like a huge emotional boost. And even just the knowledge, if you see no one, but you know that there are people out there, you know, you can check your phone when you get service and you can see there's another racer like 20 kilometers ahead of you and somebody 20 kilometers behind you. Even if you never see them, you have this feeling of like, oh, we're all doing it. I wonder if they're soaking wet as well, you know? So it's really nice to do it as part of a feeling of community, even if you never see them, you know? It's really nice.
We're just going to take one from the live feed here. You just mentioned eating some bread with a stranger for 5 minutes. What was your go-to Kyrgyz food?
Yeah. I will admit that if you're aiming to go to Kyrgyzstan for the food, you're gonna be a bit disappointed. Like there are examples of fine food in Kyrgyzstan, but they're mainly in the bigger cities, and the villages really don't have an awful lot going on. A lot of the battle in Kyrgyzstan is actually like quite intense calorie deficiency because you just can't carry 12 days worth of food on you because your bike will be like 50 kilos when you start, you know. And as you go, like the longest stretch without resupply on Kyrgyzstan on Silk Road this year was 300 kilometers. You're talking like 2.5 days or 2 days or a day and a half if you fast. And then when you eventually get there and you get to the village you've been waiting on for like 2 days, you get there and they've got bread and Coca-Cola and you're like, great, you know, and that's all you got is bread, you know. So I wouldn't know. Yeah, I mean, I could give you like terrible examples of favorite go-tos, like these freeze-dried sandwiches that are really gross and been sitting sweating in a thing for days, but you know that they're all processed food, so they're all going to make you sick. So that's nice, you know. A nice friendly little girl who spoke a little bit of English chopped me up some watermelon when I was sitting smoking a cigarette outside her house one day. I wouldn't say it was my go-to, but it was probably my favorite thing that I ate the whole time.
All the way to the back.
It's undeniably a huge physical undertaking, but how did you cope with the mental load?
Yeah. I think dealing with the mental loads is really a big part of just holding on and knowing that it will not last forever. Like for me, even the crash was like there was too much to do, too much to figure out to let myself be all bummed about it. My hardest moment in the race was there was a section of about 200 kilometers, 250, that was really, really rough washboard, and washboard is like rutted out gravel. It's in this constant bumping formation, and with the small front wheel of the cargo bike, I just couldn't hold any momentum. So I was moving so slowly, putting in so much power, and it just went on forever and ever and ever and ever and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And you can feel you making no progress and just getting exhausted, and it's so demoralizing. And you knew it was going to last another whole 24 hours. All you wanted to do was stop, but the only way to get it to be over was to keep going. And then I got really bad stomach problems at the end of the day and ended up pooping my brains outside my tent. And I just hated everything about the race. I really hated it. But I knew like, okay, I guess tomorrow might be better. I guess I hope it's better, you know. And the next day I got like halfway up a hill and I was just really not enjoying life very much. And then I bumped into another pair of racers that were doing Silk Road Mountain Race to celebrate their 10-year wedding anniversary. What a couple. They're amazing. And it turned out that she'd had really bad stomach problems a few days before and she'd taken a bunch of drugs and now she was feeling better. And she literally just said to me, hang in there, man, it'll get better. And those like 6 words, I could have cried. And I held them with me for the next half day, being like, yeah, she's right. And then it got better. And then I ate some food and I was much happier. So it's temporary. And I think a lot of the time, even and these are great metaphors for general life, like you think that everything's really complicated, how shit everything is. But then if you just have a little rest and you eat some food, you realize you're just an animal and you can get back on top again. It's all just in a cycle, you know.
There's a question here about your fitness. How did you prepare for Silk Road Mountain Race? Did you train? Did you train your fitness? Like, did you do like altitude training camp like the pro cyclist does?
Yeah, I'm very professional. If you might have noticed this about me. I mean, I've been living part of my life in Mexico City for the last few years, so that's already at 2,500 meters elevation. So it's pretty good altitude. It's also a place people go do altitude training. So that was cool because it meant that the altitude never bothered me. Like the way that altitude works is you adapt upwards within 48 to 72 hours, but you remain at an elevated level of oxygen for up to 12 weeks after you leave. So I came back here in like late June. So it was just doing this little taper off and I hit the sweet spot. And luckily the altitude never affected me at all. In terms of training, like I did a different race in June across Norway, which was 1,000 kilometers. It's a little sort of appetizer. And then I was working at B Espresso as a messenger in between and trying to just do as much volume as possible. And then I went to the gym like a real grown up and I did exercises to sort of extend my upper limits of stamina and also to strengthen my core because you spend so much time on your bike, you can get a really sore back from just holding your back in the same position for so many hours at a time that you want to make sure you've got like a really strong core if you can. But I'm not super disciplined. You go with what you got, you know.
So, Alan, when you ride your bike and you crash it, and you are kind of a master at trashing your bike, do you ever feel bad for the mechanics at Omnium who has to deal with your bike afterwards?
No, next question.
This is then maybe a question for the mechanics. How heavy is the bike?
15.9 empty. 15.9 empty.
There you go.
Only because I've been asked that many times. Very important to many people.
Could you pass it all the way down back behind the camera? Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, hey, Alan, what was your sleeping situation like with outside and weather, and how were the locals like to maybe host you for a night or something like that?
Yeah, so this is kind of a personal choice thing. I wouldn't say it's like a optimal. Whatever systems might be optimal is very, very subjective. Like personally, I really hate bivy bags, and I think that if you're in like potential for extreme weather scenarios, like you want a shelter that if things go really wrong, that you can take shelter in. So for me, I had a one-man tent. It is true the last time I did the race, my lowest temperature was -18 and I had a -18 sleeping bag. So I was sleeping in my underwear in -18. It was perfectly comfortable. This time I decided to go with a -5 sleeping bag and I had a down jacket and some thermals if it got too low. But yeah, I had a very ultralight one-man tent and a pretty good sleeping bag. And the locals, the thing is about self-supported is you're not allowed to ask a local if you can stay in their house. If a local offers it to you, then you can accept. But it's also very true to say that like in these scenarios, like, hey, do you want to stay in my tent? Also means like, do you want to meet my whole family? Do you want to make your whole meal? Like the time racks up really quick. And as much as that would be a really nice experience, you're losing a lot of time. And the beauty of having your own sleep setup and instead of doing hotels and stuff is you ride and ride and ride until you can't ride anymore. And then you stop for 3 hours and then you get back on your bike again. Like my goal in the race was to spend 19 hours of moving time a day. So if I was able to make an hour worth of stoppage time over the course of a whole day, so pretty short stops, you know, it's just a ciggy and a chocolate bar, you know, and then you, if you give yourself 4 hours at the end of the day, you got 30 minutes to put your whole tent set up and eat food and get in your sleeping bag and fall asleep. And then 30 minutes on the other side to do the opposite effect. So you only get 3 hours of sleep. But you find a rhythm, you know.
Then there's a few questions about the bike and how it managed. One of them is from Jalisco, Guadalajara.
Can I answer them in Spanish? Is that okay? No, that's so obnoxious.
Okay. So how did the bike manage on rocky roads? Like how was the stability of the bikes?
Muy estable. No, I'll answer in English. I don't really have an answer though. Yeah, the thing is the the wheelbase is really long, right? So the longer wheelbase and really wide handlebars actually gives you loads of leverage on downhills, and then really much wider tires than I've normally, like I've never ridden 2.4-inch tires before. So even as a difference to riding a regular bike on like the first time I did the race on a regular bike on 47mm tires, and these were like 56 on a cargo bike. So it was really comfortable, and I felt like it was really stable off-road. And yeah, the only thing was that on uphills you can't get out the saddle very easily because it's not as stable. But you learn to climb in the saddle.
What's the strong game for the Omnium bike?
The what?
What's the positives and the negatives of doing it on the Omnium? Is it like you said that it's more difficult to go uphill, and like is there then a plus for bringing a cargo bike?
Yeah.
And how would it manage outside of a competition, outside of a race for bike packing?
I mean, if you're in no hurry, but an Omnium cargo bike is an amazing bike for bike packing because it's just so simple to load and move around, and you don't have to worry about having a whole setup of bags because you've just got your bike and it works out really easily. Like I always have said to people that I think that the best bike for you to ride in a race is the bike that you're most comfortable on. So if it's the bike that you've spent the most time on, but it might not be the most well adapted to the race, it's still the best bike for you to be on because you feel comfortable being on it for so long. I recognized after maybe day 3 or 4 of the race that it was starting to be a bit taxing, and maybe a bit more taxing because it was a bit heavier than a regular bike. And I sort of dialed down my pace a little bit because I was going at a very blinding pace at the beginning because I was excited. But in the end, it was so important to me to finish that I didn't want to jeopardize the finish by trying to shoot for an overly ambitious time. But ultimately, it's the bike I've spent the vast majority of the last couple of years riding for work and also outside of work. So for me, the big plus was just it was the most comfortable bike I know how to ride because it's the one I spent most time on. Like I'm sure there's lots of Omnium riders out there. I normally say that my Omnium is like my sofa, and I just took my sofa to Kyrgyzstan and we got to just sit on the sofa. So I was very comfortable.
Here's a hard one. If you could change something, what would it be?
I was going to say I wouldn't have lost the GoPro, but that was really nice, and maybe my GoPro footage was a bit shit. We'll never know. It would have been nice to run time trial bars. I couldn't fit the time trial bars I had on the handlebars that we had, and it wasn't that important to me at the time, so I just went without. It would be nice to have time trial bars. But other than that, I was really pretty excited about that. You could continue to move it into a land of perfection if you wanted, but we did a lot to this bike to bring it as far as we could, or as far as it felt appropriate to do. And with the classified wheel this year, what I discovered is this is kind of a weird facet of ultra racing, but you spend so much time on the bike, and I don't have suspension, so you really damage the nerves in this part of your hand, and you tend to lose feeling in these parts of your hand after the first few days of the race, and sometimes it lasts for a few months after the race. And it means changing mechanical gears with tight cables is actually pretty hard into the end of the race, and you find yourself doing it with the other hand or just, so, and then with the classified, because it was electronic, you just go like flicky, flicky, flick, flick, and it's effortless and it does it. So if I could have had a really easygoing flicky flick on the back also, that would have been a cool improvement. But it's kind of just continuously throwing more money at it when we threw enough money at it, and it was a beautiful bike. But yeah.
There are, one of the questions here, there's a person who wants to describe your defecation situation. I'm not sure we should get too deep into that.
Fergie also asked me this when we did our interview. Extra question.
Yeah.
What was the weirdest poop story you ever had? So we'll maybe do an outtakes version of this film.
But I know that you are very happy to listen to music while you are on your bike, and that you have started publishing playlists on Spotify for other people to also listen to. if you were to choose one song, what would the soundtrack for Silk Road Mountain Race be?
Mm, Nah, it would be something obscure and dancey and gay, but or a variety of those things. Like it's the same with like picking your favorite bike or picking your best whatever. Like I'm not very big on hierarchies. I think there's a collection of things that are perfectly acceptable. So I'd say half of the playlist that I posted, I would listen to happily the whole race through. You know.
Hi. So, Alan, did you see any animals on your way? And which? And was it epic?
Surprisingly, not a lot of animals out there in the wilderness in Kyrgyzstan. It's pretty barren. Like there's a lot of birds of prey, lots of birds of prey. That's really cool. And then it's a big nomadic place, so there's a lot of goats and sheep, and then the nomadic people on their horses. There's like 3-year-old children on horses in the middle of nowhere by yourself. That's inexplicable. There's this animal. I'm gonna mess up the name. It's called like a marmot. Marmoset? Is that what it is? Yeah. It's kind of yeah. Somebody will correct me. Somebody who did the race because it's something you see all the time, or like this stupid YouTube video where the guy says my name, and it's like a beaver, and he goes like Alan. You know, it's that animal. It follows me everywhere. Fucking decades. It's like this animal, and they have funny little holes around, and they're all over the place. And then you frighten them, and they run towards the hole, and you see them every single day, and they're pretty chunky. But other than that, there's not really a huge amount of animal life, or that you see. I'm sure it's around.
Arthur is asking whether you will use the bike for work and what will happen to the bike after. And it's the marmots.
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 Because it's a brand of outdoor stuff. That's how I remembered it before. The jacket.
But I can actually partly answer to what the bike will be used for, because we will repurpose it for other races that you're going to do in the future. But you might have used it like for a short time for work, right?
Before. Yeah. Just tell them about the race. Do you remember? Yeah, sure. Yeah, I used it a bit before for work, mostly to just kind of test the limits of the rack, because the rack was a prototype and we tested it a bit with people, but we thought like, let's just use it for work. And if it works for work for a few weeks, sticking boxes on and any old thing on and off, it could be up to like 50, 60, 70 kilos. If it works for that, it worked for the race. So it worked really well. I think the carbon fiber rack is like a very exciting new OMNIUM product for whenever it materializes. And the bike itself is always technically been OMNIUM's, not been mine, and then it was loaned to me for the purposes of this race, which is very nice. And my plan for this summer which is the first time I'm really telling anyone this, is I'm doing a race called Via Race from the very south of Spain to the very south of Italy that crosses the whole of the Pyrenees and the Alps, and it's 4,200 kilometers. The time limit is 2 weeks. And we're going to repurpose this bike as like the flashiest, ultra lightest road cycling version to see if it's possible. And we are I'm yet totally certain if it's possible for me, because I've never done a road ultra before, so I've never accomplished these kind of mileages, because it's an average of almost 300 kilometers a day for 2 weeks. But we're gonna have a go.
And there's also one comment from your mom.
Oh, sweet.
She just wants to clarify that I think you mentioned that you're not competitive, and she might disagree with you.
Oh, okay. She knows better than I do.
All right, I think we're about to wrap this up. Are there any final questions for Allan?
Were there any like
unexpected things? Because I read the story about James Hayden getting chased by robbers on horses, and I just thought, were there any like crazy unexpected turns you didn't think was coming?
Yeah, in some ways it kind of just depends on what your expectations are, you know, like uh, for me, I've been there before, right? And I had an idea of what the place was like, so I can't I was kind of in the mood to just not have any expectations of and be ready for anything coming your way. uh the accident was unexpected, but I think the most unexpected part of the accident was going back to Bishkek, which is the capital city of Kyrgyzstan. There's like 3 million people living there. It's a huge metropolitan hub, and it is the most bizarre thing to be there in the middle of Silk Road Mountain Race. Because I left my bike at I got to down to this restaurant. I left my bike in the back of a restaurant. I said I'll come back for it tomorrow, and then I went back to Bishkek with just my little aqua pack with my jacket in it, just in full kit, and I just went back like that. And I stayed in some 5-star hotel just for the novelty because I could, and went to the hospital. And actually, like I got my cleaning and I got my stitches, and I got all my drugs from the thing, and I was trying to call people and get in a taxi, and the taxi driver told me to get out of the taxi because he was sure that I was wasted, because I was just like not sure what was going on and not sure how to speak Russian and all of this kind of stuff. So yeah, I think Bishkek, I went into a shopping mall and bought like a full new outfit of clothes. So I had clean clothes. And I went to a supermarket, like after doing this thing of being in the shops with the bread and the Coca-Cola, like I went to a supermarket that had just endless options of food. And that was just really bizarre and unexpected to be in the middle of the race.
So you talked about mechanical gears being really hard to use the trigger when your fingers got numb. Would you have preferred using electronic gears or having to charge them and bring on extra batteries and all of a sudden running out of batteries in the middle of a crime? Not a crime, in the middle of a climb? Um, or do you think it was worth taking in the pain of changing gears on a mechanical trigger?
I think it's all relative. Like I'm not necessarily super picky. I was very happy with my setup. I do think that it would have made things easier to have electronic shifting. I think that electronic setups have come a long way in the sense that the battery capacities are much better now than when they first came out. So there's a lot of, whereas in the beginning a few years ago, I was like, absolutely not, less stuff to charge. But I know a lot of people that use them for ultras now, and they can get very far on one charge, and then bringing one extra set of batteries or two is not actually a big weight. So in terms of a mechanical perspective, I wouldn't worry that much about the negative impacts because I think you could manage them. But it's a risk, you know. But it's all a risk. Your gear choice is ultimately like a risk. You know?
Yeah, I think we're going to do one last question from the live chat. Did you lose weight? How much did you lose? Like, did you mentioned your it was difficult to get calories? Like, how much did you eat, and how much should you have probably eaten?
Yeah, it's hard to remember how much I ate. It was as much as I could, you know. But this year I lost less weight than I did the last time I did it, and I still lost almost 6 kilos in 12 days. Last time I lost 7.5. Last year I did tour divide across the US, and I lost like 1 because you're eating like the trashiest gas station food that's like so full of bad stuff, which is like a benefit, right? Because you're getting heavy amounts of calories that you do need. But yeah, I lost 6 kilos. So it's in Kyrgyzstan, because of this whole, like, it's hard to get the calories from what you can find. The people advise that you try and put on weight before, because you're probably going to lose a bunch. And the people who are really lean at the beginning of the race can really suffer during the race because you've not got any reserves, you know.
Thank you very much, Allan. It's great to have you back in Copenhagen for good, for now at least. No, for now. And I'm personally looking forward to following your adventures this year. And first and foremost, is that the first race that you're going to race? What's the next?
This year, I'm doing 3 races. I'm doing Grand Guanche across the Canary Islands at the end of March. I'm doing this race across the south of Europe at the end of July. And I'm doing the Japan Odyssey from the south to the north of Japan in October.
You heard it here. Follow those dots. Thank you all for watching, and have a wonderful Saturday night.